I can't get these memories out of my mind, and some kind of madness has started to evolve.
And I was just calm and collected, which is weird. You would think I'd be bouncing off the walls, freaking out, screaming at rocks or something. But no, they were the ones that were freaking out. Like, one of the guys went up to where the skid marks were, and he was like, if you would have turned any more, you would have drove into this rock. He inspected the area of where I wrecked. Like, it was a little ridiculous. But yeah, I wasn't worried about anything. And that peace that came over me was from God. And I know that because he sent 4 of his people to come and sit with me while I waited for everything to settle out. And in the Bible, we see a situation that's pretty similar to it. In Matthew chapter 8, we see, does anybody know the disciples on the boat story? Yeah? Okay. Well, I'm going to read it to you. In verse 23, it says, "Then he got into the boat, and his disciples followed him. Suddenly, a furious storm came up on the lake, so that the waves swept over the boat. But Jesus was sleeping. The disciples went and woke him, saying, 'Lord, save us. We're going to drown.' He replied, 'You of little faith, why are you so afraid?' Then he got up and rebuked the winds and the waves, and it was completely calm. The men were amazed and asked, 'What kind of man is this? Even the winds and the waves obey him.'" Like, how terrifying does that sound? You're on a boat, and this storm comes up. You know, boats and storms don't mix well together. But this storm is creating waves that are crashing onto the boat. The boat is filling up with water. They're afraid they're going to drown. Okay? And the guy that invited you onto this boat is asleep. He's just chilling. He's not even caring, because little do the disciples know, he knows what's going on. But imagine you were on this boat that's filling up with water. What would you do?
Say why didn't you make me come on this?
That's a good point. But you wouldn't sit there and go to sleep, would you?
Yeah.
No, you wouldn't. You would be freaking out.
I'll eat all the candy.
And the disciples were definitely freaking out. They were like, "Holy crap, waves coming on the boat. Our boat's gonna sink. We need to get this water out." Stuff like that. We need to wake the guy that brought us on this boat. And so they went and woke him, and he calmed everything. He said, "Winds, you need to calm down. Waves, you need to calm down." And all of it became completely calm. How amazing is that? I think it's pretty cool. But that kind of peace is the peace that I felt whenever those people were with me. And it was a peace that I didn't understand at all. There's a verse in the Bible, and it says that the peace of God is unexplainable. You can't understand it. You just know that you're calm. And I mean, I should have been a nervous wreck. I should have been freaking out, but I wasn't. Everyone else was, but I was the calmest one there, because the peace of God came over me and said, "It's going to be okay."
Okay. So Chandler kind of talked about and touched on resolved fear. So he was afraid in his circumstance, but God immediately sent someone to calm him and let Chandler know that he was with him. I'm going to talk about a little bit of a different fear. I'm going to talk about unresolved fear. So a lot of you guys know my background, but if you don't, first off, my name's Lexi. So I'm 18, and when I was 14 years old, my parents divorced. And everything was kind of really crazy for a few years, and still is. Me and my older brother, he's 2.5 years older than I am, we went through joint custody, which means every week we went from parents' house to parents' house. And some things happened, and when my brother turned 16 a couple years later, or the next year, him and my dad got in a fight, and he moved out. So for a few years, I had to move back and forth by myself. And that was the first devastating blow that I got from my brother. His name's Daniel, because he was my best friend up until that time. And now I was having to do things without him, and I'd never had to deal with that in my life before. And so fast forward another year or two, when I turned 16, I also moved out of my dad's house. And so now we both live with my mom. And by that time, my brother had gotten into a really deep downward spiral. And I did too. You know, a lot of you guys know that I'm really prone to depression. I struggle with that. But my brother went a different route, and he took some self-medication, I guess, and he ended up becoming a drug addict and an alcohol addict. So this isn't something that I usually talk about with really anybody, but so for the longest time, my brother was the only person who understood me. And I was the only person who understood him. We had the same exact life, and then he left me because he went down into drugs and became an addict. And I'm not saying this to put him down. I still love him very much, and I always have. But this was one of the times that I felt the most fear in my life. Because it got to a point so bad that things started going missing around our house, and we knew that it was him to be able to supply his need. And so we had to start locking everything in the house. And it was a really tough time. It was probably about 9 months that we lived that way, 6 or 9 months. And finally, my mom, he started disappearing, and we wouldn't see him because he would come in the middle of the night and leave before we were up. And so my mom finally decided that it was time, and she kicked him out. And so 2 months went by that we didn't know where he was. And he didn't care who he was hurting anymore. He was so caught up in the life choices that he had made that he didn't know, and he didn't care. That every day we waited for him and we cried for him every day. And he just went missing. My hero in my life, my best friend, just left me behind. And I just assumed that he was dead. And those were probably the 2 scariest months of my life, because I just waited for a phone call that said his body was in a ditch somewhere. I just really thought that's what it was, waiting for a policeman to show up for our door. The only way we were getting Daniel back was in a casket, and I was almost certain of that. And every day I prayed for him, but it felt so hopeless because I just knew he was gone. We acted very normal. We acted like the normal family, even though there's nothing normal about my family. And that dread just held over us, and we just existed. We didn't really enjoy our lives. I prayed, but I didn't expect any answers. He was just gone, and I was so mad at him. And I see now that anger that I had towards him and how furious I was with him was just fear escaping, because I didn't know what was going to happen to him. I didn't know what was going to happen to my family because of him, and I didn't know what I would do without him because I just assumed he was already gone, and I was afraid to carry on without him. But fortunately, he did come home, and it wasn't in a casket. He came home with the police on his tail, and I still remember the Sunday afternoon that I saw him again for the first time. We were actually eating Sunday dinner at Randy's restaurant, and I was so mad at him. I just wanted to fight him, like I could take him. But I wanted him to hurt the way that I had hurt over him. And some days I still feel that way. I wanted him to hurt, and I wanted him to see the way my mom had cried for him every day, and the things that he put my family through, because he wanted to be selfish. But I realized that it was just all fear. I was just so afraid. I couldn't even look at him that day. And my family's so blessed and so fortunate. So many of these stories that are just like mine go such a negative way, and their siblings and their family members do come home in a casket, or they're picked up and thrown in jail. My brother's in rehab now. He's getting help. In a few months, he's moving to Pennsylvania to continue in his rehabilitation. And I'm so proud of him, and I'm really happy that this is how my story is ending up. But even with him going to rehab, he ran away, and the police were at my house more than once trying to find him. If he leaves again, he's going to prison, and we'll lose him for a lot longer than just a year to rehab. And that kind of fear that I felt and that I've dealt with through that situation can't just be resolved in one quick fix. Even when he came home and he was fine, like I said, it still wasn't just okay. I still feel that anger towards him. I still feel very hurt for him. And that fear runs so deep that if my phone rings and it's my mom in the middle of the day, I panic. Or if I get a text message in the middle of the night and it wakes me up, I panic. I think that Daniel's run away again and we can't find him again and he's going to prison. That kind of dread is hanging over me, and maybe it always will. Maybe I'll always wait for that phone call and think that he's just run off again and he's gone again and we have to start searching and praying again. But what I have learned is God can still be God in those circumstances. In my situation, God never left me. And while this wasn't a completely resolved fear in one time, God was always with me and always present and always encouraging me. So I'm going to look at a scripture in the Bible. It's actually 2 different places, but they're really close together, that has to do with unresolved fear. I'm turning to Deuteronomy, just so you guys know. It's the last chapter in Deuteronomy. And this is about Moses and Joshua. Now you guys know probably a little bit about Moses. He was the one that led the Israelites out of slavery in Egypt. Pharaoh? Yeah, okay. Maybe? Okay, maybe not. So he was called by God to release God's chosen people. And he was an incredible man of God. And this last part of Deuteronomy is his death. And the change of command is happening. So it's going from Moses to Joshua. They're almost to this promised land that God promised a long time ago. And so what I want to start with is telling you guys a little bit about Moses. Okay, so this is found in Deuteronomy 34. And I'm going to start at verse 10. This is like the very last thing that is said about Moses in this part of the Bible. Okay? Since then, no prophet has risen in Israel like Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face, who did all those miraculous signs and wonders the Lord sent him to do in Egypt, to Pharaoh and to all his officials and to his whole land. For no one has ever shown the mighty power or performed the awesome deeds that Moses did in the sight of all Israel. So Moses is a pretty cool dude, right? It says no one is ever going to be like him. He was so great. Now we got Joshua, who's trying to fill those shoes. And we can see that Joshua is dealing with some insecurity. And if you guys know insecurity and have dealt with that, you know it's not a one quick fix resolved issue. Okay? But this is from Joshua 1, which is right after this it begins. And I'm going to start in verse 3. And I just want you guys to notice how God says, I'm going to be with you and it's going to be okay. And this is how we can deal with unresolved fear. Okay? So in verse 3 it says, I will give you every place where you set your foot, as I promised Moses. Your territory will extend from the desert to Lebanon, and from the great river, the Euphrates, all the Hittite country, to the great sea on the west. No one will ever be able to stand up against you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will never leave you nor forsake you. Be strong and courageous, because you will lead these people to inherit the land I swore to their forefathers to give them. So this is something that I hold true, that, God is always with us, no matter what. And God is affirming Joshua in this time, just like God affirmed me and my family through the time that we struggled with that fear. Okay, so to me, it doesn't matter if it's resolved fear or unresolved fear. And I hope these groups will kind of help you figure out, how you can lean on God in these areas. Maybe you guys didn't get that far. But to me, it doesn't matter. It doesn't shake my faith whether God can immediately calm me or if it's a process that I have to go through. Because I know that He's made me many promises. And I hold those promises dear to my heart. And a few of them that have changed my life are, everything has worked for my good. That's a Bible verse. Not exactly sure where. But I believe that even situations like this with my brother can ultimately be worked for my good in the end, because I love God and He's always with me. Another one that He's made me, a promise that He's made me, is true love. A few years ago, my grandmother died, and her and my grandfather had been married for 50 years, and I got really bitter about it. And I was like, well, if I'm just going to be married to somebody for 50 years and then one of us is going to die, well, that's not the kind of thing that I want to be a part of. So I kind of gave up on love for a little while. And I was still dating Andrew while I gave up on love. But, yeah, well, didn't want to ruin it in case I changed my mind, and I did. God opened my heart back up and helped me see that the real true love out there is the love that he has for me. Another one is that I am a princess. I know you guys hear me say that all the time, but I am the daughter of the Most High God, and he thinks I'm awesome. And he thinks you're awesome. And you're his prince and princesses, okay, if you want to think that way. But you are sons and daughters of God, and he cares about you. When nobody else on this planet cares about you or even wants to speak to you or whatever, he's always there, and he cares about you. He's close to you. He has a will and a purpose for my life, so that means when I start doubting and I'm in Ethan's office with Chandler and I'm I can't do this, I can't get up here and speak 5 minutes before 7 o'clock, I can trust that this is what God wants for my life and can trust that he'll see me through it. And he's always with me. He'll never leave me. Just like I read, he'll never forsake me or you. So I just want to ask the question of what kind of fear is holding on to you tonight? Because sometimes we hold fear and sometimes fear holds us. And I want you to invite you to give it over to God. So if you want to pray about something or talk about something, grab one of us, grab an adult. We would love to talk to you and pray with you about it if you would let us. Okay? So I'm going to pray for you really quick. Okay? Okay. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for just this opportunity to get to speak to the youth group. It's an opportunity that I always enjoy, even if I get a little nervous about it. And mostly, though, thank you so much for conquering our fears for us and winning those battles, God, and just being with us to show us that you fought these battles and won them. And I just pray that each person in here has gotten something out of tonight, God, and that maybe they're starting to think about some fears that they can overcome in your name. And I just pray that they realize that we don't have that spirit of fear within us. That's a learned trait, but we have the spirit of love. And I pray that they will reconnect to that spirit of love and overcome their fears. And if there's something pressing on their heart, that they'll have the courage to grab somebody and talk with them about it and pray about it, God, and find redemption tonight, because I know that you are a God of redemption and that you will, like I said before, work everything for our good and just be there for us, God. Just bless the fellowship and the time that we will have after youth. Thank you so much. We love you. In your name I pray. Amen.